Liz, we are live for our halftime show. This is really happening. This is like football is here. How awesome for you does it feel to be fully immersed in the NFL, just have it all wash over us again?
I mean, it feels fantastic. And I think one of the best parts is getting confirmation about the things we thought, and then also excited, not dismayed by the things that perhaps we didn't predict. We already have injuries, not that those are good, but it does offer opportunities for players who were perhaps less heralded or more under the radar to get some pub. And also, I mean, Cam is back, although some might say he never went away.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's start off talking about Cam Newton. And remember, if you're watching on our social feeds, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, we can see you in the chat room, and we are paying attention to you. You are not screaming into the void. And on that note, Richard from Twitter says Cam Newton looks a little bit rusty until that touchdown, but that's the key there. We saw a rushing touchdown from Cam. We're getting designed runs from the former MVP. I mean, how ridiculous is it that after a dynasty run with Tom Brady, the NFL just gets wrapped Cam Newton and passes him on to New England and lets the damn Patriots have this guy? Liz, how are you feeling with Cam Newton in New England right now?
I mean, I think what you said about designed runs makes me so excited, because heading into this season, you're talking about the Patriots' ability to see something that no other franchise can see. They signed Cam Newton to a one-year bare minimum deal and give Bill Belichick, along with Josh McDaniels, the one offensive advantage they haven't had for 15 years in the modern NFL era, and that is a rushing quarterback, clearly part of their plan. Now, admittedly, the matchup against the Miami Dolphins, not the most stout defense, not the toughest matchup, but the perfect way to ease Cam Newton in, who, by the way, has the same number of rushing attempts as Rex Burkhead and Sony Michel.
Yeah, that backfield looks like it's going to be as confusing as ever with Damian Harris out to start the season as well. Let's go to another backfield that might be a little more confusing than initially thought. Liz, how much of a victory lap did you take for your bold prediction that Nyheim Hines was going to be the first rushing touchdown of the 2020 Sunday slate?
Oh, girl, my bench is taking one heck of a victory lap, because that is where Nyheim Hines is firmly planted in many leagues. Like, listen, Nyheim Hines scored the first touchdown of the first NFL Sunday in 2020, which is the perfect thing for 2020, right? So on brand.
Right.
This is the presumed pass-catching back in Indianapolis, not Jonathan Taylor, not Marlon Mack, who you have a note on, and I want to discuss a little bit more in a minute. But Nyheim Hines has two tubs, one through the air, one on the ground. I am thinking that maybe why is his name escape me? Reich might want to, who is arguably more of a traditionalist, might want to ease Jonathan Taylor into the rotation more than any of us anticipated.
Yeah, like there was that report coming into this week that the Colts drafted Jonathan Taylor to spell Marlon Mack, and Fantasy Twitter took a resounding giggle at it. But maybe that was a little bit, maybe not the exact truth, but it might have been a bit of a hint at something that Jonathan Taylor was going to walk into this big workload. But going forward, it might have to happen because Marlon Mack was carted off with an ankle injury, like you mentioned. And just on the note with Nyheim Hines, like, you almost certainly didn't start him today, right? But you have to look at this result and think, man, I'm glad I drafted this guy. Like, if you did, because Phillip Rivers has always propped up these pass-catching backs. I know I drafted him in a couple of leagues just based on that fact alone. Like, he was going to get some targets in the passing game. You could project him pretty well in half-point and PPR leagues. So you got to know going forward, you have a pretty decent bird in the hand here, even if this backfield is already looking a little more confusing than we might have thought.
Yeah, we definitely have to keep an eye on Mack's injury and if he'll be out at all. Also worth noting that Hines is rostered right now in 15% of Yahoo fantasy leagues. And I don't think we can just think of Hines as a pass-catching back, though, because I didn't roster him partially because I did not expect Indianapolis to be chasing points against Jacksonville. I mean, that would be when you want to roll out Hines. And so 15%, he might, if we were to do an early waivers pickup thing, which I don't think we have to do this year, I think he might be on my watch list.
Yeah, no kidding. That's shocking that only 15% of leagues, but like you mentioned, there are two highly drafted backs going ahead of him. So you couldn't really project him for much. Let's go to something that we actually did kind of expect. Josh Jacobs rushed in a touchdown for the Las Vegas Raiders. This game has been a little bit maybe closer than people thought, but also we've got another injury in that game to update. Henry Ruggs, the first-round pick out of Alabama, also left this game with an injury as well.
Yeah, I have to say, it's a little disheartening because Ruggs, the presumed speedster, the first wide receiver, in fact, drafted in 2020, back in April, did have a really nice, Derek Carr threw a dime, I believe it was a 45-yard completion to Ruggs, and then he leaves banged up. We talked about Bryan Edwards. He hasn't really done much of anything. I don't even think he's drawn a single target. It's Darren Waller who is leading the receivers, or the pass catchers, I should say, in opportunities here.
Yeah, Waller was an interesting one to me because I think people sort of, expected the targets to sort of take a step back when they drafted 2 receivers. Obviously, Tyrell Williams was coming back from injury. Hunter Renfro's another interesting slot guy they had. But it really seems as if, step by step, we've gotten closer here to Waller actually maybe meeting or maybe even exceeding his 2019 value simply because he's the most established guy there left. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being sort of a draft value for people. Also, it's worth noting Nelson Aguilar is going to fit into the mix here. He had an pretty awesome catch from Derek Carr in the end zone. Scored a touchdown there with the Las Vegas Raiders. He's obviously playing there as well. I want to touch on this note that we got something from the chat. Joey P sent a lot of emojis, by the way. The emojis are key. We've got a robot in there. Looks like a squid, a brain. All of us thought we had big brains this morning when we recommended Boston Scott as like a must play with Miles Sanders out of the mix. 4 carries, 11 yards, and 2 catches for 19 yards. Not a great outing for Boston Scott, despite the fact that the Eagles are up 17-7 on the Washington football.
Yeah, this is a work in progress. Deshaun Jackson also not seeing the love that I thought he would be. In fact, it's the 2 tight ends, right? Like Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, your friend and my friend Marcus Grant said that he was a little bit worried about Ertz because he thought that Goddard might do just enough to prevent Ertz from ROIing on his ADP. And this is the tight end situation. I also think, though, before we talk about that, the Washington football team has some interesting things going on. Antonio Gibson, with Bryce Love not in the game, is seeing the majority of the rushing attempts, which is nice to see. And also Logan Thomas, the tight end, touchdown.
Lynchburg, Virginia, the pride of Lynchburg, Virginia, former Virginia Tech quarterback, Logan Thomas, Virginia, stand up. We're hyped today. Logan Thomas is a thing. Listen, I talk about drum beats from camp all the time. It was harder than ever to get it this year, but man, Ron Rivera and the folks out of Washington could not stop talking about Logan Thomas. JJ Zacharyson from Number Fire and FanDuel, he talked about if there was going to be this year's Darren Waller, who we just talked about earlier, it was going to be Logan Thomas. Perfect example, like a tight end who sort of comes out of nowhere. Former quarterback, too. Another guy, Darren Waller had a position switch, too. Obviously harder going from quarterback to tight end, but still sort of fits along the same mold. I wouldn't be surprised if you're doing pickups, I think Logan Thomas should be on your radar. I talked about him in my week 1 analytics column. Like, if he's playing a good amount of snaps and he's running a good amount of routes, this could be a potential sneaky breakout tight end. So definitely make sure to check out that on the waiver wire. Also,
real quick, just so you mentioned, rostered in 1% of Yahoo leagues, first of all, so absolutely keep him on your radar. And secondly, he is second in team targets to Terry McLaurin. He only has 1 catch, and he has 3 looks to McLaurin's 4. Obviously, McLaurin's the number 1 here, but forget your Steve Sims hot takes. Forget any of that other nonsense. It looks like Logan, and it makes sense, right? You were totally spot on, so I just want to make sure everyone knows, 1% rostered, that number's going up next week.
Yeah, for real. And McLaurin, 3 catches for 43 yards. Clearly the established number 1. I think that's a fine pick there. Now, we talked about Marlon Mack earlier. Just do want to update people if you're not aware. He is ruled out with an ankle injury. Not a good sign when you're immediately ruled out like that. Richard hit us up again on Twitter and says, will Adam Gase make it through the season as the coach of the Jets? I do not think so. Let's update everybody on that Jets-Bills game. I've been watching that one a lot because I'm super invested in this Bills offense. You know, John Brown, Stephon Diggs, my guys. But Josh Allen is your highest scoring player in fantasy, but he might be a little bit lucky that he's playing the Jets because he's also had two hilarious fumbles in this game. But maybe this is confirmation bias for me, Liz. Maybe you can rein me back in a little. I'm so excited about this Bills offense, and I think this is going to be a good unit all year, despite the fact that they're beating up on a cream puff today.
Well, I think part of the reason this unit looks good is not just because they've added, Stephon Diggs, the best route runner in the league, but Zach Moss, who was a training camp standout, is showing out. In fact, He was the touchdown that Josh Allen, by the way, nearly broke his hands. My God, can this kid get some touch? But regardless, I was just like, that is something. He went for it.
Seriously.
But Moss reeled it in. I think Moss, at least for right now, halfway into the first game of the first week of NFL action, looks as advertised. And as for the Jets, man, you want to guess Le'Veon Bell's YPC in this one?
I was just about to pull up the box score, but I'm sure it's got to be sub 3, right? It's got to be in the 2s.
Over under 2, my friend. Over under 2.
Well, since you asked, now I'm going to go under.
Correct.
It's oh, jeez. Good Lord.
It is
what are we doing here?
And if that didn't turn your stomach enough, I know this will. Over under 8 targets for Jamison Crowder. With 3 points on the board, by the way.
Over, under, I'm going to go under.
It's actually 8 targets. I gave you the actual number, but 8 targets averaging 8.5 yards per reception. And yet, the Jets have a field goal and nothing else.
Yeah, that sounds about right. This Bills offense, by the way, you're great to reference Zach Moss because despite the fact that, he's got a receiving touchdown, which we sort of expected he might end up being the primary pass catching back, he was also the goal line back too. Josh Allen, the Jets must have been reading that fantasy Twitter hype. I'll tell you what, Liz, because Josh Allen did a little play fake to Zach Moss, and all those Jets players followed him right there on the goal line. But I think that's pretty key for Zach Moss's value. He's going to be the goal line back. He's going to be the receiving back. But Josh Allen, 12 carries to 3 for Singletary, 3 for to Zach Moss. So, Josh Allen's going to keep on running. Doesn't matter who's in the backfield.
What about if we're talking about backfields? Can we turn our attention to the Seattle-Atlanta game? Because
oh, yes.
These 2 veteran backs, Chris Carson, still got it, 2 tubs, last I checked. It might be more than that right now. And Todd Gurley leaping a pile into the end zone.
Yeah.
I don't know if those knees are going to hold up all season, but they're looking spry in week 1.
Yeah, no kidding. Plenty of people wanted the Seahawks to let Russ cook so that Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf could get rolling. Well, look, they're letting Russ cook. 15 pass attempts so far, not running the ball that much, but it's been Chris Carson through the air, 5 catches, 42 yards, and the 2 touchdowns. So, you got the process right, but the results, it's hard to say. But Todd Gurley's an interesting one because, like you said, are the knees going to hold up throughout the season? Right now, 10 for 51 and 1 touchdown. If you had Todd Gurley on your fantasy teams, I don't know, I didn't draft him anywhere personally because I don't want to have to ask myself this question, but if you had Todd Gurley on one of your fantasy teams, Liz, and you see him having this big performance like this, is he maybe somebody that you might want to think about trading to get a better value on early in the year?
Well, if you want to sell high while he's still healthy, I unfortunately think you can't do that in week 1 because that's already the thought, right? So people are gonna be like, oh, I know this is kind of a trap. But I will say if we're still in week 3 and he's getting this volume and production, then yes, I want to be ahead of the curve. But I also want to be ahead of the curve, not at the curve, which is where he is right now.
Right, that's a good point. I would say that, people are probably still going to be asking that question. Maybe if he has another great week 2 performance, then we could start thinking about doing something like this. Anything else stand out to you from the early games really catch your eye, or something that you're looking forward to in the second half or the later games even?
I'm really actually looking forward to the Chargers-Bengals game. I like Tyrod Taylor a lot, especially in DFS, and I think Austin Eckler, and I know you agree with me on this, has been completely disrespected throughout the draft process, and I think he is absolutely going to cook against the Bengals. I got some heat from a Bengals fan, like one of them, the only one, who told me I was too down on the Bengals defense, and we shall see.
Yeah, we shall see is a good way to put it. Yeah, I'm with you. I love Austin Eckler. I think this guy is going to smash this week. I think he's going to smash all season. Liz, this has been awesome. Really flexing these week 1 muscles again. I love seeing football back here. I am so juiced for the second half. I'm juiced for the later games. I am especially excited for Sunday Night Football. I think that is going to be a real fun contest. Make sure to keep it plugged into our Twitter handles, at Yahoo Fantasy, at LizLoza_FF. I'm at MattHarmon_BYB. Good luck to all you weirdos and your fake teams out there.